Hey everyone, Dan Saavedra here from mergerdata.com, and today I wanted to go into the Google BigQuery connector inside of Tableau. I think that there's a lot of good information in the documentation that Tableau provides that isn't really well known, but it can come in handy when developing using Google BigQuery. So we're going to dive into a few of those things that I saw that I think could be useful for you if you're a Tableau developer. Now, connecting to Google BigQuery is pretty simple. If you're in a new workbook, you can just go to the Google BigQuery connector, click on it, sign in using OAuth, and basically that's going to open up a window and you'll be able to sign in using your Google account. Now, given you have the correct permissions, you'll be able to see all the data sets, your billing accounts, and stuff like that. So I'm just going to log in real quick to here so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to click on my profile. It's going to ask me for a password or if I want to provide access to Tableau, and so I'll click allow, and then basically that means that we're good to go. And so then when you go back to Tableau, you'll have your billing projects that you can select from, and then your actual projects from inside of Google BigQuery. And so if you select the billing project, and then the data set, I'm just using the samples here, you'll be able to see all the tables that are in Google BigQuery, so then you can drag and drop them onto the canvas here and basically build a data source like you would with any other connection that you can use inside of Tableau. But optimizing inside of Google BigQuery for Tableau is a whole nother story, and there's a few things that we can look at in order to improve performance. And so I'm going to go back to the documentation for Google BigQuery here and scroll down. They actually have really good documentation around how to use Google BigQuery. And so the first thing to notice is that there is a specific way that Google BigQuery is used by Tableau. And Tableau does some really cool things from the data side of things in order to make sure that fetching the data is efficient and useful for building visualizations and also for viewing them. And so basically what's happening is Tableau is querying BigQuery, and they're trying to see how many records are being returned. So there's a standard parameter that's used, and basically if the data that's returned says, there's more than the standard amount that we're expecting, then we're going to iterate through and change the query. So in this section, you can see in their own words exactly how that works. It's basically two approaches. First time they send the non-spool query with the standard settings, and then if the result set is too large, they get an error back, and then they end up sending a second query that has different parameters. And so if we scroll up a little bit, they have these different attributes that you can modify for bigger data sets, and you can actually change these in your TDC file for your connection. So if I scroll down further, they talk about here specifying attributes in a TDC file so that you can say exactly what you want to set those parameters to. So if you know that you're going to be dealing with larger data sets and you want more data to be fetched at once, then you can do that here. You can change the values of those customizations. So that's number one. When working with bigger data sets, it might be useful to specify those attributes so that querying is more efficient. Obviously, you have to consider your cloud spend when doing this, but you can bring back a lot more records than what Tableau will initially be looking for, making your development and your viewing much more efficient. The next useful nugget to improve your performance when using BigQuery is the BigQuery BI engine to analyze data. And so if you're familiar with Google Cloud Platform, then you probably have heard of this already. If you're more on the Tableau side, this might be a little more obscure. You might have to talk to a data engineer or a cloud engineer to learn more about how this is done. But Tableau links out to this, and it brings you to Google documentation. And basically, BI engine allows you to reserve capacity inside of Google Cloud to serve data faster. It accelerates your queries that are coming from Tableau back to BigQuery. And honestly, if you want to get into the weeds on this, I would go to the What is BI Engine page on Google Cloud. They talk a little bit about how the BI engine is caching and querying SQL queries that you're using most frequently. So it's basically intelligently looking at the data that you pull most and how it can efficiently pull that data when people request it in the future. Now, I don't know the details of this product very well. I'm sure there are many more experts out there that can give you deeper insights into BI Engine. The only thing I would note is that there are limitations when it comes to using the BI Engine. So it is good to know those because it's not just something that you plug in and can use in any case, in any situation. So I would recommend reading the documentation and going through that. And before we move on to the next thing I wanted to look at, two of the main things that the BI Engine mentions when it's talking about limitations is if you use wildcards in your queries or if you use any of the BigQuery features, which BI Engine doesn't support. So you might be doing some things in BigQuery that BI Engine isn't going to be able to use in your dashboard. So those are things that you want to look out for. Make sure to read the documentation, but it is a very useful thing to know in case you're dealing with super large sets of live data that you want to pull into your dashboards in Tableau. You can start tweaking things by using BI Engine, by changing the attributes in your connection file, and a few other things. Now, before we part ways here, I wanted to pull up this white paper by Tableau because it shares things that I think they missed out on in the documentation. And the native optimizations portion of this document is really, really interesting because it shows the intelligence of Tableau and what separates it from a lot of other BI tools. Now, people often think of Tableau as just a simple visualization tool, when in reality, behind the scenes, there are a crazy amount of things happening that makes it easier and plausible for you to build visualizations in Tableau that are interactive and that can pull data pretty quickly. Now, if you remember using Tableau years ago, if you had the fortunate experience of doing that, then you'll remember that oftentimes it was difficult to use large data sets that weren't very standardized. And so over time, as the Hyper Engine came out and other optimizations, it's just gotten so easy and so much better to use the platform in order to crunch data. So a couple of those things that are covered in this white paper is number one, parallel queries. So Tableau is actually already utilizing some features in these platforms to make querying more efficient, and one of those is parallel querying. And so basically it's batching queries together and then sending them to BigQuery if the result is not already cached. So the more you're using BigQuery for your dashboards and the larger your usage, the better you're going to see, or the better performance you're going to see, just because of how Tableau will be running these parallel queries and using the data across different data sources. It's kind of related to the query fusion here from my understanding, just from reading this white paper, where basically it's trying to identify similar queries and then finding the most common set of data that it can pull and then use it throughout results across a Tableau Cloud and various workbooks. So it's a pretty crazy set of features that I don't think they highlight enough. It's really awesome to read this and see all the engineering that goes on behind the scenes that makes it easier to use the connector in an efficient way. Because in the past, it used to be so difficult to optimize for larger data sets or more complex data models. Now, one thing I always like to mention after going into these deep dives of how to optimize for certain connectors and fringe use cases of larger data sets and more complex data models is that always go back to the fundamentals and make sure that your dashboard architecture, the way you're using Tableau, is aligned with best practices, because you're going to see a lot of gains just by designing your dashboards more efficiently, making sure that you're using the performance recorder to see exactly how you can optimize performance, reduce the amount of queries that are happening when a user loads a dashboard, and the complexity of your calculations. So hopefully this video was useful to you. Hopefully you've found a few things that you can use with your BigQuery connection to Tableau. If you've been struggling with performance issues with dashboards that use this connector, maybe these are some things that you can look into to make your dashboards more performant.